Hey y'all, my name is Bill Ferreter and it's time for another 10-minute team tip. Listen, I think I've got a resource for you that you may really like exploring. If you've stumbled across this resource through my YouTube channel, you can find a direct link to the resource in the session notes down below. As most of you know, I spend a lot of time coaching up collaborative teacher teams around the PLC at work process. And one of the things that I'm charged with teaching teachers is the steps that we take when we're studying our practice together. As many of you know, that begins by identifying an essential standard and then working through a process of studying that essential. First, so that we can help students to master the essential, and second, so that we can identify instructional strategies that we use that have a greater likelihood of helping students to master the outcomes we care about. In the PLC at work process, we call that completing a cycle of inquiry. We study essentials one essential at a time, and we do our best to learn as much as we can, both about our students and our instructional strategies. Now, whenever I pitch the idea of cycles of inquiry to teachers, whenever I teach them about completing a cycle of inquiry, I like to refer them to this particular graphic, which was created by a friend and a colleague of ours named Rich Smith. What I love about this graphic is it shows teachers the individual steps that we take when we're answering each of the 4 critical questions of learning in the PLC at work process. If you're familiar with the PLC at work process, those 4 critical questions are in the gray bars, aren't they? Teams of teachers, when they're studying their practice together, we answer those questions sequentially, one at a time. And I've always found those questions to be a helpful guide. When I'm in a collaborative team meeting, what we say to ourselves is what's something we want our students to know and be able to do? How will we assess the progress that they're making towards mastery? What steps will we take when they struggle, and what steps will we take when they're exceeding our expectations? Now, what a lot of teams ask me is, I like the 4 critical questions, Bill, but what do we actually do when we're answering each of those questions? And that's what makes Rich's graphic so valuable. If you look underneath each of the gray bars, Rich has described to teams the actual steps that you take when you're answering each of the 4 critical questions of learning. That level of specificity is super valuable to people. Now, when I share this graphic all by itself, it has value. I've seen teams and schools post posters of this in their workroom. I've seen them make copies of it to leave on tables. I've watched them create agendas that are tied specifically to each of the individual action steps. But I still have people who will ask me questions looking for more specificity. For example, they might say, Bill, I see that the second blue box says to understand each essential, but what does that mean? What do we actually do when we're developing a shared understanding of an essential? I've had other teams say to me before, Bill, I see that it says we can introduce students to non-essential outcomes as an extension. But what does that mean? Like when we introduce students to non-essential outcomes, what would we actually be doing? And so that's where this particular tool comes in. I'm calling it a toolkit of resources for completing a cycle of inquiry. Let me show you how it works. When you're using the toolkit, I want you to come to this slide. It's the one that has the graphic of Rich's cycle of inquiry on it. And then I want you to click the slideshow button inside of Google Slides. When you do, just like any slideshow, it's going to enlarge Rich's graphic on your screen. And that's where things get interesting, because what I've done is I've created links on each of the individual boxes inside of Rich's graphic. So let's say your team wants to know more about developing common assessments. If you click that particular box, it's going to take you directly to an informational page that gives you a short overview of why we create common formative assessments and how we create those assessments. Then, if you're interested, you can click the blue button at the bottom of the slide, and it will take you to a collection of resources that I think might help you when it comes to developing common assessments. Sometimes those individual resources are tools that I've created to support teams. Other times you might see videos from my 10-minute team tips page where I'm explaining processes to teachers. So my goal is to give you a more detailed overview of what each step in a cycle of inquiry means, and to link you directly to a few resources that might help you complete that work. When your team is finished learning about developing common assessments, you can click the Return to Cycle button in the bottom left-hand corner, and it'll take you right back to Rich's graphic. Let me model that again for you. Let's say your team wants to learn more about analyzing common assessment data. You would click on this box on Rich's graphic. It'll take you to a short overview explaining what that step of the process is all about and how we do it. And then, if there's any resources that I have to offer you, you'll see a blue button that you can click, and it will take you to a resource page with a collection of tools that you might find useful as you try to implement that step of a stage of inquiry. Now, I've got one final thought to share with you. I've done more than enough sharing with you, right? There's lots of resources that belong to me on this particular or in this particular toolkit. But sometimes you're going to have your own resources for completing each stage of the cycle of inquiry. For example, your school or your district may have a template that you already use to analyze data. In that case, what I would encourage you to do is make a copy of my toolkit and put your resources on each of these pages. Do you understand that? I'm happy to share my tools with you, and I know that they work because I've made them in my work with my own collaborative team or in my work with other collaborative teams. So if you find my content valuable, you can keep my toolkit just as it is. But I would also encourage you that as you get deeper into your journey with professional learning communities at work, and as you start to make materials and resources that you believe in, I would encourage you to make a copy of my toolkit, and then on each of the individual resource pages, start linking to things that you believe in. Start linking to things that you've made. Start linking to things that you use on the regular. Doing so will turn this toolkit from a general resource that I think works into a more specific resource for your school community. All right, I can't wait to hear what you think of this. It took me quite a while to make. I'm sort of excited about it. I think it's going to be useful. But again, I haven't shared it with anybody until just now. So if you really dig it, shoot me an email and let me know. I'd love to hear what you think. All right, hope this was worth your time. Speak to you soon. Bye.